This is the Distinctly Detroit podcast, the only pod that explores why one wants to be in the D. I am your host, Fyodor III, the director of the University of Michigan Detroit Center. Join me as I interview students, scholars, leaders, and innovators about living, working, and loving in Detroit. Good day, and welcome to the Distinctly Detroit podcast, the only pod that explores what makes one want to be in the D. Today's guest is a successful senior executive that specializes in international team building, team management, and implementing change that delivers innovative solutions to organizational issues. He served our country as an Air Force electronic technician. He served our community as a high school teacher for Detroit Public Schools, and he has devoted more than 25 years to Ford Motor Company as a director. He received his bachelor's degree from Wayne State University and an MBA from Michigan State University. He is currently the president, CEO of J3P Enterprise LLC, and the director of the Michigan Engineering Zone. The DDP welcomes Julian Pate III. Welcome, Julian.
Thank you. Nice to be with you.
Thank you. Glad to have you here. Really excited to talk to you. And the first question, if it's okay with you, how old are you?
I'll be 78 in March.
You're 78. So why are you still working?
Depends on how you define work. I mean, I think I can't sit on my hands. I prefer to be involved, engaged, doing something. And I think under the current circumstances, there are ways to be involved in the city or in the community that really favor the kinds of things that I think about and the kinds of needs that I think the community has. So that's why I'm still involved.
Okay. Well, that's one of the things that excited me as we had a casual conversation one day, and I was getting to know you a little bit more. I was like, oh, we got to have you on the pod because I love what you do. Can you tell us what the Michigan Engineering Zone is?
The Michigan Engineering Zone is a makerspace that is now 13 years old that was created as the result of a U of M alum having a conversation with the Dean of the College of Engineering to say that there is a need in the city for a space to facilitate inner city students, city high school students, to be involved in robotics. These two gentlemen who brought the question initially said that they were mentoring around the city, but unfortunately at the time that they started, most schools didn't have facilities that could be used for this pursuit in the school. They didn't have machine shops, they didn't have tools, they didn't have a dedicated space. And between these two former Ford engineers, they couldn't cover the city themselves. So the proposal was the university interested in doing something like that? The dean at the time, Dave Munson, said absolutely, and let's find a space and facilitate it. That's really how the MES got started. The suite was empty here in the Detroit Center. They took 3 months from October to roughly January of 2010 to get ready for the 2010 season, which really was supported by companies, individuals who were held a similar notion about having our kids involved in robotics. So they essentially built the MES space in time to start in January of 2010. They started with, I think, 6 teams originally. We currently have 20 teams. So we're servicing about 300 kids a year to understand what the annual game challenge is, which occurs in January. They have 6 weeks to design and build the robot that can play the game or solve the challenge. And then there are 3 weeks of intense competition among the over 400 teams in the state of Michigan, ultimately resulting in state championships occurring the end of April, and following 2 weeks later, the World Championships. Up until last year, Detroit had hosted the Worlds for 3 years running. So, and the MES has had teams involved both at the state level and at the World Championship level. We've never had a World Championship winner. We have had state contenders, though.
Oh, that's awesome. So what have you found to be the strongest benefits of the programs for the students that participate?
Well, I think our perspective is really very simple. This is not about turning all of our students into robotics engineers. It really is about helping them to develop critical thinking skills, to help them understand the benefit of team involvement other than on some type of play field, also to recognize that problem solving that is used in dealing with some of the issues that they encounter on the robots can apply to other life situations as well. So just to help them analyze, develop solutions, modify the solutions, and continue to move forward in the problems that they're attempting to solve. I think that's a big need for our kids. I mean, when I was a high school student, or even before that, we used to tinker. We used to take things apart. We used to play with tools. Students don't do that anymore. I mean, their primary pursuit in many instances is their computer or their phone. So they don't have any base knowledge in the use of tools or even what the tools are. So that's another side benefit that comes out of this, because in the MES, they're using hand tools, they're using power tools. We try to help them understand how to use that equipment safely, as well as the benefits of using using tools the way they're designed to be built. A crescent wrench is not a hammer. You don't use a crescent wrench to drive a nail. You use a hammer to drive a nail. You use a ball peen hammer to form metal. You don't use a screwdriver to pry things apart. These are not fundamental skills that our kids have. And it's not that they aren't interested, it's just that they're not exposed to them. So we take the tack, if we can provide some fundamental grounding, some fundamental understanding of how you do things and what you can do them with, it just provides an option that our kids wouldn't have otherwise.
That's awesome. Yeah, I remember shop class in middle school, but never anything with robotics and learning about tools, things like that. That's an interesting point. A screwdriver is not to pry things apart. How do you work through generational gaps? I mean, again, you're one of the things, you're working with such young students.
Well, I mean, I think what I've come to learn over lots of different assignments in lots of different places, both in the country and around the world, is the best asset you have is to listen first. I think that we have a lot to learn from our youngsters if we give them the space to say what's on their mind and not be so critical of the language that they're using or the way they're describing things, and really try to strive to understand the content of what they're attempting to say. I think too often we fall into the trap of thinking that we know all there is to know about something. So if we were just telling them that they'll be okay, and when fundamentally, for the kinds of challenge that they encounter with our robots, sometimes it's best to ask them what they want to do, offer them the option of doing it their way, and supporting the objectives that they set for themselves. What we found a long time ago, and what I found here since I've been here, if we don't instruct the adults, we can't motivate and facilitate the growth of the students. As long as an adult is saying something or giving direction, the students will just stand and listen. Or let's say it differently, the students will just stand and watch because they're not necessarily listening. And it's obvious in the room. If you see students that have taken a couple steps back from their workstation, some who have their hands on their hips or their hands in their pocket, you can be assured that there is some adult that is on the speaking platform possibly giving direction and obviously not listening. In those circumstances, we try to help our mentors, the professional mentors, as well as student mentors, understand that don't necessarily believe all you have heard or read about the students in the city of Detroit. Just throw all that out of the window. Look at them as individuals with their own space, with their own ideas, with their own energy, and help them understand that you're here to support the objectives that they set for themselves. And you'll get the development of a much more cohesive team, and the students will learn a lot more, because you may recognize from your days as a teenager, I know it was for me, teenagers don't like to be wrong. They don't like to be told that they're wrong. They don't like to be told that they don't know what they're doing. They don't like to be hovered over by adults who, as I said, think they know everything. But they are very willing to demonstrate their own perspective if you share with them that you're here to be an assistance to them, that you are willing to be a part of their community, that you are here to offer the skills and experience that you have to their objectives and to their plans. Most of us have no idea of the circumstances that our kids come from. We have no idea the problems that they may be having, not only in school, but in the world. So when we come with this perspective of, I know all that you're dealing with, they don't want to hear that, because too often they have not been supported by people that said that they were here to help. So you have to demonstrate that you're here to help, and then you're more likely to build a cohesive relationship with these teenagers.
Well, you just touched upon it a little bit. So what are some of the challenges the young people you're working with are facing?
Well, for a pursuit like the robot itself, or understanding the issues associated with designing and building the robot, they have little or no experience. That's number one. On number two, the skills that I alluded to before, as far as the use of tools, the appropriate use of tools, the use of mathematics as a part of the solution to what we do, is not a big plus. Our kids don't come with a lot of those strengths. Some do, but most don't. So the idea is to show them how those skills apply using more hands-on approaches as opposed to lecture. You can't lecture your way through the design and build of the robot. You have to recognize that sometimes things work, but most times they don't work the way you think they're going to work, which means that you have to rethink what your original idea was and be willing to accept that it's not going down that road and make the modifications necessary to adjust it. That's not a failure. That's not something wrong. It's just a way the whole engineering process works. You take a stab at it. If it doesn't deliver what you're looking for, you adjust it and take a second stab at it. And when it gets a little bit closer, you take a third stab at it. It's an iterative process. You have a plan, you work the plan, and you modify the plan as you go with the objective ultimately in mind. And that's what happens in Ford, GM, Chrysler, IBM, Google. That's the way the design process works. But you can't give a group of students a lecture on how to do that. You really have to demonstrate how it works, let them experience their own successes and their own failures, but it's not a failure, it's just another try. If you approach it that way, they're really quite resilient and responsive. But I mean, I guess back to the generational question, we have to be willing to understand where they are and meet them where they are, and not try to force them to be where you think they ought to be. I mean, they are where they are. That's all there is. There's nothing you can do to change that. So you might as well just be flexible. We're much more pliable in terms of the application of knowledge than they are, and meet them where they are and lead them through the steps that will help them deliver their objective. For some old-timers like myself, that's a pain. I was not trained or raised the way many of our students are. My view of the world for some students is radically different than their view of the world. But as I said, it's not about me. It's about me assisting them. It's got to be about the student. And if we approach it that way and are willing to use our ears more than our mouth, we can be much more effective in having them get the most out of this experience. Because as difficult as it is, it really, at the end of the day, is about doing something you've never done before, being able to experience the satisfaction of being able to do it, and to have fun at the same time, particularly with the adults that we have in this process. It's supposed to be fun, even though there are more constraints on it than you want to think about. But at the end of the day, it's not supposed to be an overall stressful activity, as time-consuming as it is, and as critical as some of the decisions are that bear upon the objective. They have 6 weeks from the day they find out what the challenge is to be able to deliver a robot that performs the challenge. And that is perhaps more stressful on the coaches and the adults than it is on the students. because the students don't know what won't work. So in many instances are more willing to try it. And sometimes we all get surprised when something that someone said, well, we tried that before and it didn't work. And a team tries it again and finds a way to make it work. And that's really what this is all about. Not identifying the road, the speed bumps, but more facilitating the realm of the possible.
Wow, that's a realm of the possible. I like that line. So what are some of the benefits of working with young people? Is it true that working with young people keeps you young?
I would question that. I mean, I think for me, my temperament has changed. I mean, I was in a corporate setting for almost 35 years, actually more than that. And the rules that apply in a corporate setting don't necessarily translate directly to interacting with the teachers that we're involved with and the students that we're involved with. In the corporate world, the deadline is set and there is no option but to meet the deadline or beat the deadline. In the real world, dealing with our students and some of the staff from the variety of schools around, a deadline is just a suggestion. And you have to deal with their reality, and which means that even though it was due today, it's not due today. So what's the next opportunity to complete the task? We do use corporate tools or engineering tools to try to keep them on task by giving them what we refer to as milestones. There are about 14 milestones from zero to the end. And the milestones kind of provide a broad framework for understanding what the expectation is and how to determine whether the expectation has been satisfied. But if they don't meet the milestone, that doesn't mean stop. The objective is still to have an operable robot. So whatever the issues were that impeded the success of that milestone, you have to work around it. I mean, it's another bite at the apple. You can't just say, okay, we didn't do that, so what do we do now? You need to work through it. I think that persistence, that drawing them back to the plan is as valuable as learning the tools. I mean, too often we have a failure mentality which says if you don't do this, you can't get to the next step, when in fact you should be thinking about, again, the realm of the possible. How can I get there even though this particular task wasn't finished on time? You readjust. That's what you have to do.
Okay. And so what has been your biggest surprise while managing the mez?
The fact that 6 weeks is more like 3 weeks. I think the realization since I've been out of the corporate world is not just as it regards the mez. I mean, I spent almost 15 years at Focus Hope before coming to the mez, is the fact that life intercedes. I don't care how much time you spend on a plan, how much time you spend trying to orient people to what the overall task is. Life gets in the way. And for many of the students that we deal with, those speed bumps caused by life are traumatic. It's not simply, oh, I need to divert a little bit. Sometimes it stops people dead in their tracks, and they don't know where to go next. So you have to help them understand that you didn't see this issue coming. There's nothing that you could have done to forecast it, but it's here. So what are the options that we have, and continue to work? I think those life lessons are perhaps the most valuable thing that some of these students can walk away with, because too often they've been told what they can't do with few suggestions on what they can do. I mean, when I was, I guess I was about to graduate from high school, my ambition was fundamentally to be a pilot. That's what I wanted to be. I wanted to be a pilot. And I was absolutely on my way to achieving that goal. I was a candidate to the Air Force Academy. My life was set. I was going to go to Colorado Springs, spend 4 years, graduate with an engineering degree, and be a jet pilot. That's what I wanted to be. And that was the objective until the day I took the physical for entry into the academy and was told that I wasn't physically fit to go to the academy. So what do? Go sit in a corner and say, I can't be a pilot? No, you find out something else to do. So I enlisted in the Air Force, and it was some of the most profitable experience of my life to understand how to work with people that you don't know, who you didn't have a choice in being on your team, who may have a radically different world view than you do, but at the end of the day, our objectives were all the same, and we learned to work together, drawing upon our respective skills to meet the objective. That's the way it was. And I think that helped me appreciate the fact that you are who you are, and the people that you're working with are who they are. If you have a collective objective, you try to figure out how to use what you have to get the objective done. Does it always work smoothly? Absolutely not. But the fact that it doesn't work smoothly doesn't mean that you are still not obligated to meet the objective that was set for you. So if we're able to have our kids speak, use their voice, and we use our ears, maybe we'll all be better off for it. I mean, it's not just an adult-student situation, it is an adult-adult situation as well. Many of the kids here, or many of the folks that I work with at Focus Hope, you have no idea the depths to which people have dug themselves from to try to make a way for themselves. I mean, I can think of a handful of students, female students at Focus Hope, who were leaving the house at 3 in the morning so they could be there when class started at 7 or 7:30. And it was fundamentally over issues they had no control of. There was no transportation. There was no child care. There were all kinds of issues that people struggle with every day, as I said earlier, many of which we have no experience with. Yet we want to think that we know best when actually we don't have a clue. And I think that helped me substantially because it was so radically different than the culture that I worked in for 30 years and the way the objective set worked inside the corporation as contrasted to the people that were struggling to meet the day, to meet the meal, to meet clothes to satisfy the needs of their children. So once you encounter those folks, it really opens your eyes. You are much less type A, because type A does nothing for those individuals. If you're not willing to meet them where they are, you can't help them.
Well, that ties into one of the things I think ties back to a question. One of the challenges, one of the things I was fascinated about the MES is that you all, as I understand it, you all discovered there was a food security issue with your students, and you all stepped up to meet that issue by providing meals as part of the program. And you even gone so far as like hire a social worker to be part of the team. How's that working out?
Well, I mean, I think the assumption was that every student came to us after having had at least a couple of full meals a day. You don't know that. You only think that. You could research it, but why waste the time? If you are in a situation to provide some type of meal in the evening, you should just do it. Because fundamentally, the number of students that are on low or supplemental food programs is more than you can count. So rather than trying to differentiate, we provide a simple meal each day. And we know that for the time that they're with us, they've at least had that one meal. And I think that's really again, the positive approach that we took was just to do it. The notion of the social worker was really, we learned that. I mean, we brought an individual in to assist us with some administrative tasks and found out that he had a broad range of sociological skills in addition to a master's in social work, that we have used his insights to inform some of the tasks and projects that our students are involved in, and have really grown the notion of the MES as a community. everybody in the room is there for everybody else. There is no competition in the room. We're there to help each other. We're there to listen to each other. And we're there to help them all understand the value of this type of program. That these tools that you don't know how to use are yours. So the better you know how to use them, the better we are to assure that everybody will have access to that tool. The computers that we have are there for the use of everyone. We have a universal passcode, a universal login. It's not a secret. Everybody knows what it is. That's to make it easier for people to access it. All we say as far as the computer systems are, there's no web surfing, there's no game playing, but there is access to knowledge that might benefit the task that they're confronted with in the room. So consequently, the computers are there for everyone to use. And we do find ways to guide them to websites that can be beneficial to the task. I mean, as I said, we don't have the broad range of math skills in the room that I'd like to see, but we have guided students to websites that assist them in managing their measurement skills or growing their measurement skills, because that makes their overall task that much easier. You can't estimate the size of a hole. You need to know precisely what size the hole needs to be and drill that hole. You can't estimate where the line ought to be. You need to measure so that the line is precisely where you want it to be. So when you cut a piece of aluminum, it is the length that you want it to be when you're finished. And this is new experience that many of these students have not had before but benefit from. I mean, they surprise us every day. I mean, and that's the best position to be in, to provide the environment where they're safe and comfortable. They can say what's on their mind. We're not there to criticize the language that they're used. We're there to understand what they're trying to say. In recent years, this whole notion of gender equity has been a big deal for us. We've, for the time I've been there, had at least over 40% young ladies. Now we're about 50-50 and have been for the last several years. But even on a broader sense, the notion of diversity, equity, and inclusion has taken a more prominent role to make, again, a safe platform for students to say what's on their mind. They have thoughts too. We don't give them the opportunity half the time to share their thoughts because we're too busy telling them what to do. So you get surprised when you offer an open-ended question about some broadly general topic and you get an answer that blows you away. I think a good example within the FIRST Robotics world, they have a playlist of music that they've been using at these competitions for years. And one of our teams several years ago came back and said, I never heard of this music. Where does music come from? I mean, the expectation is everybody knows it and everybody knows the same dances and everybody will do the same thing, because at the competition it really is to be a much more, I guess I'd say, athletic-oriented experience as opposed to a technically oriented experience. When FIRST Robotics was first created, it was really to help the nerds in the world understand that they could have fun too, and that it could be as enjoyable as a basketball game, a football game, or a swimming meet. And that's the way that they approach the development of it. But even within that construct, our kids had a different playlist than the first playlist. So it's been good to see in the last handful of years that the playlist has been reviewed and modified so that it is much more open to all who are involved, all communities who are involved, regardless of where the kids come from or what they look like. And that's a good thing.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. How do you think your mentors benefit from being mentors?
Well, I think back to what I said a little while ago. We do a lot of work with our mentors to remind them that it's all about the kids. It's not about where you work or what you do or what you know. It really is how you can use where you work and what you know to assist these students in answering difficult questions. And I think that if you do a good job in focusing your mentors on what the objective of the organization is, then they can leave that experience having learned something themselves. I mean, I can go back to the food insecurity question. Everybody assumes that, okay, your kids in high school are like my kids in high school, and I make sure they have a good breakfast, and I know that they have lunch money, and I know that there's going to be a good dinner waiting for them when they come home. That is not necessarily true of every high school student and every family in this city. So don't make that assumption. Give yourself a chance to better understand the circumstance. Then you can understand how you can help. And you don't necessarily help by giving. You can help very much by listening, understanding what's being sought, and then if you can provide it personally, fine. If you can provide it as a part of a group, that's even better. We don't need a food pantry in the mezz. We need individuals and organizations that appreciate that food insecurity is bigger than the students that are in our room. And if we look at it from a global perspective and seek to solve it that way, our kids will be nourished as well.
Okay. I want to switch gears a little bit. You've had a lot of different roles in different organizations over the years, and I'm just curious, as someone who's still working at 78, and myself as a middle-aged man, so how would you encourage them? I mean, how would you advise a middle-aged professional to think about their retirement?
I don't know what retirement is. I think I would make it broader than that. I think that if there is something that you can be passionate about, if there is some way that you think you can make a small contribution to the betterment of our world, our city, our society, that's where you should put your energy. Because if lacking that, it's really just what I guess I call a showpiece. If you really want to make a difference, put your time and energy and resources into something that you really care about. And it could be, it could be fishing as far as that's concerned. I mean, if that's something that really turns you on, be a fisherman. Use your time to help you better appreciate the opportunities that you have. If it means giving to others, if you can be passionate about an organization or about a pursuit, do that, because you have, over the course of your working life, gained a tremendous amount of expertise, experience, relationships, many of which can be brought to bear to this thing that you have a passion about. As for me, I got involved in mentoring in middle school classes when I was an engineer, and that grew to being involved with the board of directors for what is now Detroit Area College for Pre-Engineering Program, DAPSEP. I was involved in DAPSEP for over 10 or 12 years. And this is just an extension of that. It is all about trying to provide knowledge and resources to allow our kids to be exposed to things that are new to them and to be successful as a result of those exposures. I can think of students who out of high school would not have been considered for anything, frankly. But then I can reflect upon a handful of students that went on to get associate's degrees in engineering and ultimately bachelor's degrees in engineering, where had they applied to someone's college of engineering, they would not have even been considered for an interview by virtue of their high school performance. So you just have to understand that there is the realm of the possible. Sometimes it is you because you know of a resource that this individual student doesn't know about, so simply sharing that resource or knowledge of that resource is a giant step. Other times it is having a heart-to-heart with students, either in your family or your neighbors, to help them understand that they too can be an engineer or a doctor. I was not first in my class in high school. I was not first in my class as an undergraduate. I did better in graduate school, but you come to understand which things are important and which things are not important. I was told once by a physics professor how important it was to spend time in the lab after school to get a 2-point advantage on my grade. And I knew it was more important to me as a married man with a family working every day to use those 3 hours a week somewhere else. So I told him I wasn't coming to his lab. He didn't like that, but in the grand scheme of things, you have to do what's right for your circumstance. And it didn't affect my overall grade in the class. So you just have to understand what you need to do in your situation and be willing to speak up for that. And you too can be a 78-year-old electrical engineer.
So you just said you don't know what retirement is, but you've assured me, as you know, we're making transitions here at the Detroit Center down the road to the Rackham Memorial Education Building, that you will not be taking that move with us. So what is
No,
your
what I said is I don't know when it's going to happen.
Okay.
I will continue to do things that I enjoy doing.
Gotcha.
And I think if that includes the transition, we'll see. At the time we were talking about that, there was no definitive timeline for when that was going to happen. And you can always speculate that it's going to be soon, but in any bureaucracy, soon can be 2 or 3 years. So I don't know what I'll be doing 2 or 3 years from now.
Okay. Well, all right. Well, we're going to switch it up again. We got what I call our lightning round. And we're going to ask you a couple questions that we ask all of our guests. And the first is, how do you practice self-care?
I like to read, and I know when I need to read, not for the knowledge to be gained by reading, but by disconnecting from the other things that are going on. And I think inside of that is being willing to say that I need to take some time, because the stresses that we are encountering today are unlike anything I've seen in my lifetime, and they seem to be increasing every day. So you have to stand up for yourself and be willing to say it out loud, because if you don't, you won't be provided the opportunity to do it.
Okay. So what are you reading?
I'm currently reading 400 Souls. It's a history of the African American in this country, written by 400 contributing authors. Really was an outgrowth of the 1619 Project to offer Black insights into African American history, of which there are not that many. So it's an interesting read.
Okay. What are you listening to?
I'm kind of a confused music lover. What that means is blood, sweat, and tears on one end, and Beethoven and Bartok on the other end. I enjoy classical music very much. I don't know a lot about it, but once I realize that you don't have to know a lot about it to enjoy it, it makes enjoying it that much easier. You don't need to know the birth dates of the composers or their boyfriend or girlfriend's name to enjoy their music. Beethoven and Tchaikovsky got me through college. It was always on in the background. It was relaxing, which is what you need to do when you're supposed to be studying.
Yeah. Okay. What are you watching?
Action and drama. I don't want to have to think when I'm watching a movie. I enjoy the excitement of action heroes. I enjoy the excitement of a good murder mystery, but I don't want to have to think about it. I'm not looking for a psychological drama. My wife and I spend at least 1 hour an evening trying to watch a film of some type. We've been doing that for our mutual health, and I think we've become pretty good detectives, maybe to the chagrin of writers if they had the opportunity to talk to us, because some of the recent spate of either TV drama or movie dramas, they're kind of shallow. They're not doing as good a job as they could do.
I agree with that. Where do you like to go out to eat in the city?
We enjoy Oriental food. Well, let me say that differently. I'm an omnivore. I can eat and will eat anything, anywhere. My wife is much more discriminating, so she kind of guides me to restaurants that she thinks are important. I've said to her, I do not have a discriminating palate where I can tell if there is parsley or basil in it. If it's satisfying, I'm good with it. So I'm open to anything. Most recently, we went to a Japanese restaurant called Kabuki, which specializes in sushi and sashimi, which I enjoy at a high level.
Okay. So if a friend of yours were coming to town to come visit the city of Detroit, what is something you would tell them they absolutely have to do?
They have to go to the Motown Museum. They have to go to the Charles Wright Museum of African American History. They ought to go to the DIA, since it's one of the most renowned museums in the country, if not the world. And given the opportunity to take in a live concert, if there is something that the DSO is doing, see that. I think in the age of COVID, there's been more concert music available via Zoom than perhaps at any time in the past. Plus, the other point is that we're losing music aficionados. I mean, our kids don't know a lot about other music than what they're listening to on their iPhone, and I think that we need to take advantage of the opportunity to expose our kids to a broader range of music, and that could be electronica, or it could be K-pop. I mean, I think there are benefits to you as an individual to let music wash over you, because it takes us to a place that sometimes you can't get there without it.
That's awesome. And the last question we have is, where can we find you?
Suite 100, 3663 Woodward Avenue, the Michigan Engineering Zone.
Okay. Are you on social media at all?
No, I'm not. I am not interested. I think I still have an account on LinkedIn.
You do?
The level of connectiveness that so many are involved in, I'm not interested in. I think that I would much rather have the conversation than trying to send photographs back and forth to deliver the emotional message. I think that conversation is the most rewarding for me, whether it is on the phone or writing letters. I think that we're losing those skills, unfortunately, when I think we maybe need them more than ever in our life.
Well, I thank you for having a conversation with me today. I really enjoyed this, and I was really excited to have you on. This was everything I hoped it would be and more, and I hope you enjoyed the experience. And thank you very much for coming out today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thanks for asking me, Fiotis.
Yeah, and that's it for today, ladies and gentlemen. Julian Pate, we ask that you can listen to the Distinctly Detroit podcast wherever you get your pods. Please rate, review, and subscribe, and have a great day. Thank you for listening to the DDP. This is a production of the University of Michigan Detroit Center. You can find us anywhere you get your pods. Please rate, review, and subscribe. This podcast is directed and produced by Marlon Franklin, edited by Mackenzie Hewitt, writing contributions by James Neely and Florence Alexander.